That's right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Principles of Fitness podcast. My name is Cameron Harn, and on today's episode, we have industry legend Anthony Carey with us on the show today. Anthony is the CEO and founder of a company called Function First, based out in San Diego, where they are helping people manage their pain experience to a whole nother level. Now, Anthony has a resume longer than I can list on this intro, so I'm just going to put it in the show notes for you. But he has a master's in biomechanics and athletic training, and he uses his sound understanding of biomechanics to help people manage their pain experience more effectively. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today, is how our bodies interpret pain and how Anthony uses a non-invasive approach, a movement-based approach towards helping people mitigate their pain experience more effectively. Not only do we talk about pain, but we also talk about how Anthony got started in the industry, what his why is, what some of the core values are over at Function First, and who were some of the people that helped him get to where he is today. There's also a ton of information that I'm going to include in the show notes, including Anthony's pain-free movement specialist program that you can find on the American Council on Exercise, his invention, the Cortex. We talk a little bit about finding your why, so the Discover Your Why course that Simon Sinek has produced. You can check that out also. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this episode with Anthony Carey. Anthony, I want to get my listeners to know you a little bit better. Can you just tell me a little bit about how you got started in the fitness industry? And I know from my conversation with Derek on the podcast, he says you're kind of like the man when it comes to helping people get out of pain.
Well, that's very kind of him to say that. That is mainly what I've done for the better part of my career in terms of working with clientele and the type of science and research that I've dove into. We do it, of course, all through an exercise intervention. We don't do any hands-on stuff because that would be outside of our professional boundaries, but it's understanding the science, it's understanding the biomechanics, it's understanding the needs of the individual, and it's providing them with hope and empowerment through what we do that has really led to some of the folks really doing well with our program over the years. And I've had the good fortune and the privilege of working with people from more than 30 some states in the U.S. and 17 plus countries around the world that have either come to see us live or worked with us remotely.
That's awesome. And intervention through exercise. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you came about the process? Because I think that's something that's incredible that a lot of us can benefit from, because you have clients who are coming in all the time who are complaining about chronic injuries. And how do you go about the proper interventions for them?
Well, one of the things that we've always done and that we would continue to do is realize that pain is a very comprehensive and complex experience that everybody has. We never design exercise programs, and I'm using my fingers here to make quotes, to treat anybody, because again, that's outside of our professional boundaries. We never use the word treat. We never call our customers patients. They know that they're coming in for an exercise program. But what we do is we look at the body more globally, as well as, again, kind of the needs of where that individual is and some of their concerns and their fears and their apprehensions and their insights into what past interventions have done for them, good, bad, or indifferent. And then we use biomechanics as the platform in terms of deciding on exercises, but those exercises also have to mesh well with the entire biopsychosocial lens from which we view our programming. And that simply means that it's not just about a tight muscle, a weak muscle, a valgus knee. It has as much to do with mechanical stress as it does to do with a person's beliefs and expectations about their pain, ideas that have been thrust upon them from medical professionals, stressors that are introduced as a result of experiencing this pain or in anticipation of this pain. So the programming is really geared around reducing the threat to that individual, both biomechanically and psychologically, and putting together a very specific strategic sequencing of exercises that doesn't provoke pain, builds their confidence, and then integrates their neuromusculoskeletal system all at the same time.
That's fantastic. Now, I've experienced this myself where an individual come in complaining about some type of chronic injury. And, I'm glad you brought up this biopsychosocial aspect of it too, because I find that when they come in and they have an issue and like, okay, well, let's go get to a physician, let's go to a doctor, let's see what's going on with that area. And when they leave and they go see the doctor, I find that sometimes the symptoms get worse because now all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, now we get an MRI. And then it's like, oh my gosh, wait. And then now, like, when people hear like, okay, well, now we got to go get an MRI, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm way worse off than I thought I was. And then they get the MRI and then there's some type of abnormality, which you had made a post about asymptomatic abnormalities from an MRI scan. And I want to talk about that also with this. But then they get that scan and then, okay, oh man, now there's something wrong with me. Now that it's worse. I've got, then it's like, okay, now there's the prospect of surgery. I might need to get surgery. And then all of a sudden it's like this cascading effect of bad to worse, especially emotionally for them. Like, how do you go about properly guiding them through that process and showing them that, hey, we can solve these issues through movement?
What you're describing is more common than not. And if you could imagine somebody who does like what I do, so you probably see folks of all abilities, right? I only get the person who's got chronic pain and has already been to the doctor, has already been to the physical therapist, has already been to the chiropractor, has already been had injections. They've had a lot of that, so they're doubled down on all of the negative effects of that fear that you're describing and that anticipation of more bad things to come. So, I mean, right off the bat, the first thing that we want to share with them is that most of what they're seeing is normal, part of an aging process, and that we refer to that as just wrinkles on the inside, meaning that the correlation of the degenerative changes to their pain is very, very low. And in fact, there's much more predictors of let's say, chronic lower back pain that are not related to what the MRI shows. So for a lot of folks, if there's not significant radicular pain, nerve pain, there's not significant any loss of function, meaning that there's muscle weakness or drop foot or something like that. There's no bowel or bladder problems or those sorts of more extreme things. It's probably better off at this point. And this is and the medical community is starting to see and agree with this as well, is that you shouldn't get an MRI, especially if it's going to elicit that kind of response from the individual.
Really?
Because you're going to see, I'm 51 years old. I have no lower back pain. If you MRI'd my back, you probably see degenerative changes. And again, that's normal. That's absolutely normal. I don't have, and then you could MRI somebody who's 25 who has excruciating chronic back pain for 5 years, and their spine might look normal. So the relationship between the two are not. Matter of fact, there was a study done looking at men in their 50s, and they MRI'd their lower backs, and they filled out this extensive kind of psychological profile questionnaire. And what they learned was that depression was a greater predictor of lower back pain in that population than their MRIs.
Whoa.
And that's because their MRIs were bound to show something, right? I played sports. I played football through college. I mean, I crashed my mountain bike. I'm probably going to show some issues in my body throughout. But none of that is associated with any chronic pain that I experience.
So then why do we get so dependent on what the results are from the scan? Why is it that people kind of hang their hats on? Is it because they feel like they're going to find a solution through the scan that, okay, if I get this done, then that means that there is going to be an end to my pain eventually? That's
certainly one of the reasons to do it. Well, first of all, it goes way back. There's a lot of reasons that goes into that, and we don't even want to get into sort of doctors trying to cover their ass against liability and all that. But it also goes way back to the fact that for up until 10 to 12 years ago, and unfortunately, there's a lot of practitioners that still view it this way, that pain was purely a biomechanical kind of biochemical event. And now we know it's much different than that, which is why you can have a back that's totally jacked up and through imaging, but have no pain, because there's not that one-to-one correlation, right? So if the understanding at the time was that if you have degenerative discs in your back, for example, then that's why you have back pain. Well, so then we got to order up an MRI to find out what's going on back there, right? So that's part of it. And then the other part of it would be exactly what you were describing, in that, the individuals we're always trying to find a villain. What can we blame? And if I can label something, place a label on this, then I know I have some clarity. I have some confidence or certainty that that's what it is. But the downside to that is, if I'm 60 years old and it shows that I've got scoliosis and congenital degeneration within my congenital scoliosis, and I've got degeneration in my spine, and you've told me that, and I have back pain, and you tell me my back pain is related to that. Well, I'm not going to undegenerate my spine, and I'm not, right? So how am I ever going to get out of pain? Well, therefore, I'm getting older, so pain is a consequence of getting older that I'm just going to have to live with for the rest of my life. And that's not true either.
I hear that way too often, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah. And there's data out there on that too, that the number of people that believe that getting older corresponds with having pain, or vice versa, having pain corresponds with getting older.
I guess just to help people understand a little, could you take us through kind of what is going on for people when they are experiencing pain? Because I feel like the more of an understanding that we have with kind of our bodies and why we experience pain, it'll give us a better clarity on like the proper procedures that we can go to alleviate that pain or mitigate it a little bit better.
Absolutely. So if we're talking to fitness and medical professionals, we would understand what the term nociception means, right? So nociception is information that's picked up from the periphery, meaning our nervous system in our skin and our joints and the tissue, even in blood vessels, is going to send data. So what we used to think was nociception equaled pain, right? Yeah. So, and nociception can be either thermal, chemical, or mechanical, right? So they're the three ways that information enters into our data banks. But so basically what it is, though, is it's data that travels from the periphery to the spinal cord, and then up the spinal cord, where once it reaches the brain has to make a decision. The brain decides, is this dangerous? Is this a threat? Or is it something else? If the brain senses that it's a threat, then we're going to experience pain. Okay? And that's because pain is generally a protective mechanism, right? If you sprain your ankle, having pain in your ankle around those damaged ligaments is beneficial, because it tells you to stay off your ankle, don't walk on it, so that it can heal. Mm-hmm. But there becomes a point where pain no longer serves a purpose, and that's where pain is considered chronic, right? So chronic pain now is loosely defined as anything that is consistent for 3 months or intermittent for 6 months or more. So if the timeline comes from the fact that that's about how long it takes tissue to heal. So if I did sprain my ankle, if I did damage my ligaments at the end of 3 months, generally that tissue should have healed. So if the pain was specifically related to the damaged tissue and the tissue has healed, I should have no more pain. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
9 months later, I've still got pain in my ankle. The tissue is healed. It no longer correlates with tissue damage. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes. So now you got chronic pain in your ankle, and you start to wonder what is going on. Well, at this point, something has happened to the sensitization within your nervous system, because you're walking every day, right? And you still have pain in your ankle, and maybe you're limping a little bit. Maybe your ankle even throbs just when you're laying in bed at night. But it's because there's still data traveling up to your brain. Your brain has pieced together a bunch of different aspects within itself that is linked to that ankle, that now is still producing pain, or the experience of pain, when there's needn't be any, because there's no longer a threat.
Yeah.
And the more we experience that, the stronger and more ingrained it becomes within our nervous system, so that we start to experience more and more. We get better at the pain experience the more that we've had it and the longer that we've had it, which is nothing that we want to go around bragging about, right?
Yeah, which some people do. They're always like, "Oh yeah, it's just a shoulder, no big deal. I've dealt with it for years."
Right. Well, that actually speaks a little bit more to the psychosocial side of things as well, because now they've identified with their pain, right? And it either becomes a badge of honor, it becomes a reason why they can't do certain things, it becomes a topic of conversation to get them a little bit of attention. There's a whole lot of other aspects that are beyond just the fact that it's been bothering me for years and I just keep working through it.
Yeah. When you get somebody who's been recommended that they stay off, let's say post, I might be getting a little too far off from this, but post-surgery, or is it better for them to stay off an injury or to just kind of work through it? What is kind of the thought process behind that?
Well, I don't work with post-surgical folks unless it's become chronic. They're much better going to the qualified physical therapist for that sort of thing, for what they might need. Yeah. And, if we go back to that biopsychosocial paradigm, or that biopsychosocial lens from which we view these folks through, that's three separate yet interdependent factors that go into the pain experience. And that doesn't mean one's more important than the other, or only one will occur for your knee, but all three will occur for your shoulder. So there is always going to be a biomechanical / biochemical aspect to this. So you can get a ton of nociception post-surgery that is telling your body that, this needs to heal, leave it alone. We need to do all the right things to let that happen. And if you're looking at something like, say, a lower back, you may not want to move it too much. But if you're looking at more of one of the joints and extremities or something like that, they may be working on range of motion with you, that because of fear that you're not going to get that motion back from protecting it too long. So it does depend on where that person is in that healing continuum. And there's actually different schools of thought on that as well, I think, in the rehab community. But when you have chronic pain, and folks experience this, there's sort of full body type pain like fibromyalgia that people will get all over. And then there might be local chronic pain that somebody has either in their back or their neck or something like that. And trying to work through the pain has its downside too, because what it'll do is it'll further ingrain or strengthen what's called a neurotag or neurorepresentation in the brain of that pain. Now, on the flip side of it, you can't just avoid doing anything that ever makes it hurt, because that's almost impossible. And it adds to really shrinking your world, or what I would call your movement catalog that's available to you at that point. So there is a balance, but that's where it becomes super valuable to work with somebody that understands that and can gradually expose you to a little bit more in these safer, non-threatening exercises and ways that you can sort of create this novelty to the nervous system so that it doesn't associate it with the existing neurorepresentation in the brain. And then it really gives you a window of opportunity to make some significant changes in how a person functions and feels and how they perceive what they're capable of.
Now, are you helping them, are you provoking them into certain movement patterns that will establish confidence? And then have you noticed when people seem to move in a certain way that they weren't paying attention to, and then you're like, hey, look, now you've got, better knee flexion. Does the pain start to go away for them, or do they feel more confident? They feel better? How does that, I guess more of that psychosocial experience start to go for them?
Well, it absolutely can happen that way. Generally, it's going to happen a little bit over time, and that is a way that we address some of the limitations. We'll create movement at a segment in their body or a portion of their body in a way that they've never done it before, whether it's coming from above or below, which is much different than what they associate with the pain. And then when you do that, and you pointed out to them that, look what you just did, you have provided both in that biopsychosocial viewpoint, you've given them both a biomechanical, neurological difference in how they achieved it, so the novelty without pain, but you've also added to their confidence because now they see that it's possible that it can happen, right? Now, it's not, in my experience, it's not just a switch that flips one time and stays on. It requires, I describe it to my clients as, when you have fear, let's say it's of the knee going downstairs, and even before you get to the stair, you're at the top of the stairs, you're already anticipating the pain. That's because you've had a boatload of historical reference that tells you that that's going to be painful, right? So
yes,
one
absolutely.
event in my presence in my studio at Function First is not going to necessarily wipe out that completely, but it's, if you don't mind, I share with you an analogy that we call the haunted house effect. And this will resonate. Okay. This will resonate with pretty much everybody. Every year around Halloween, pops up on social media. You see these images of, and I don't even know where this haunted house is, but it's like a camera takes a snapshot and lights flash on the individuals as they've just seen what has to be the most ungodly, frightening thing in the haunted house that anybody's ever seen, right? Because you never get to see what they're scared of, but you get to see their reactions. And you'll see these, huge muscle guys jumping on the back of their 4'10" girlfriends because their eyes are bulging, right? So imagine what's happening with that individual at that moment, right? As soon as that flash happens, they've got all kinds of co-contractions going on in their muscles, right? Their bodies just tighten up. They're in this complete arousal state with either holding their breath or shallow breathing, eyes dilated, adrenaline and cortisol just pumping into their systems, right? Breathing has shallowed, heart rate's elevated, blood pressure's elevated, right? So the same thing happens with this person who's about to walk down the stairs if their pain really is that bad in their knee and it's been going on long enough. Maybe not quite as extreme, but they're going through all this. But now think what happens to that same group of people in the haunted house as they see that thing, they're scared to death, they move to the next thing, and they're like, oh my God, that was horrible, right? But then they come to the next corner that looks just like the corner that they just had the living daylight scared out of them. And before they turn that corner, what do you think's happening to their body?
They're amping up. They're getting ready for it.
They're going through exactly everything that they went through when we saw that picture taken. Maybe not quite at the same levels, but all those systems are firing the same, right? And guess what? They turn the corner and there's nothing over there but a unicorn, right? But they just went through that same exact event. And they're going to experience that at every corner throughout that haunted house, right? So guess what happens? By the time they leave the haunted house, they're exhausted, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So the person who experiences lower back pain when they sit, or the person whose knee hurts when they go down the stairs, they're going through those same events, even if they don't go down the stairs, even if they just walk up to the stairs. So now that all becomes more and more ingrained in both their nervous system and in their physiological response at the same time.
Now, I have a client currently who is going through this exact same haunted house effect, right? He'll come in and he complains about radiating, not radiating, but just like tightness is what he says. He describes it as tightness coming down his legs. So his posterior chain, like glutes to hamstrings down to the calves. And he's like, I don't know what it is. Every time that, throughout the day, I don't feel anything. But once I come into the gym, I'm in pain. And I'm like, what did you do differently from your day-to-day routine to the moment you walk into the gym that is causing this issue? How do you help somebody? How do you guide somebody through that so that they don't have to experience this haunted house effect anymore?
And that definitely sounds like it's not a purely biomechanical issue, right? Because if it happens literally when he walks into the door, he's either had an experience in that facility that was not positive around that part of his body, which would be a big thing. But I would share with him, right? So if it doesn't happen all day, let me take a step back. The most important thing that you have to do with that client, or anybody for that matter, when they have these kind of concerns that they're having, is not dismiss them and validate that what they're experiencing, no matter how crazy it might sound, is very real to them. Right. So if you tell him, that's bullshit. You cannot walk in my door and suddenly your hand. To him, it's as real as, the hand on the end of his arm. So you can't You can't dismiss that. You've got to validate it. Now, it may make no sense to you, whatever, but you have to. That is extremely important, because otherwise you've lost that client, and you've probably done some harm, at least in his perception of what an exercise professional is about and that sort of thing. So I would find out, can you take them somewhere else, and does it still happen? Can you do the same workout with them somewhere else? Because you're saying literally when he walks in, it tightens up, or has he done something first?
Every single time. Well, he's working with somebody else also, and I don't know what they're doing. From my understanding, it's a lot of high volume work with resistance bands and like doing hamstring curls on Swiss balls. And so I don't know what's going on at the other location, but it's just like either it's the gym atmosphere, is it something when he's coming into my facility and he's seen a PT, and the PT goes, your flexibility looks amazing, your mobility is good. Like, he says it's something that's going on with his the alignment of his pelvis, but I don't know.
But it literally happens before he's done anything.
When he walks into the gym, is kind of he says, I don't know what's going on. Like, he walks in, he goes, they're tightening up again.
And do you know anything that happens in terms of his commute? Does he walk? Does he drive in a different car? Anything like that?
Sedentary for long periods of the day, minimal water intake, high caffeine intake, and that's about it. Lives a pretty stress-free lifestyle, owns his own business.
Yeah, well, anybody who owns their own business doesn't live a stress-free lifestyle.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It certainly has something to do exactly like you're describing, like the haunted house effect, in that there's an anticipation of something, right?
Okay.
And what the only thing I could suggest, because obviously there's biomechanical things you could do, right? You could say, well, let's look at your pelvis when you were done with our intervention. Let's look at your pelvis when you come in before. Is that related? So this is a great example, not only the haunted house effect, but he has a firm belief, right? And this means as much as anything. Yeah. He has a belief that it's his pelvis, right? And if the PT has cleared his hamstrings, cleared his pelvis, and said it's not a problem, it still wasn't enough. It's still not enough information for him to make a decision that it's not his pelvis, right? So what would happen, let's say, if you met him in a park nearby, or you met him in a parking lot for that matter, and you started a warm up out there and then brought him in, or anything that would disrupt the routine of what he would be doing. So, for example, if you took him and met him in the parking lot, and then you guys started the gentle warm up out there with high knees or whatever, and then from there you brought him in, and immediately don't ask him about his hamstrings, and immediately get him into doing something else, or whether it's between exercise and conversation that doesn't even give him a chance to think about it, then at some point he's probably going to say, oh, I'm feeling my hamstrings again. But now you can number one, look and see if that doing something different before he came in and distracting him for a while delayed the onset, and let him know that, okay, so you could tell him, I'm pretty confident it's not related to what we're doing. It's probably a stress response that you're having, and then ask him, is there anything that we can do to reduce the stress that you may not even be aware that you're feeling when you come in, or the anticipation, or let him know that blame the other guy. Say whatever you're doing at the other place is correct. I'm just kidding.
What's going on over there?
But it is worth asking, because I do have clients come in also that may be concurrently seeing another practitioner, and they're doing fine because they haven't seen that practitioner for 3 weeks, and they saw them and they come in and the practitioner wants to throw this at them and that at them, and it's like they're messing with a recipe that's already working well. But there just may be, there might be something going on over there that genuinely is causing him a little bit of anxiety when he heads into the gym, and that anxiety could be because he's afraid it's going to hurt. It could be anxiety because of the environment, in terms of there's a bunch of super fit people there that he doesn't want to look bad. He needs an excuse of why he can't execute some of the exercises, and that excuse could be that his hamstrings are so tight, right? So there's probably a lot of things that are driving that physiological response that aren't biomechanical in nature.
Yeah, that's a huge psychological one. Yeah. I mean, going into a place where you want to feel like you can hang with the rest of the guys that are in there, or the rest of the members of the gym, and go, oh, but my hamstrings, and then you can back out. You have an excuse to not move forward.
Exactly.
With it.
Exactly. So again, at the end of the day, he's getting some. This won't make sense to some people, but because if they're experiencing pain, but at the end of the day, this gentleman is getting some win out of this. It may be a short-term win. It may be a win that relieves him the anxiety of performance in the gym, whatever it is, but there's a win in it for him at some level.
That's huge. There's so much psychology behind that. I mean, we can probably dive into it, but it would take forever. And I just kind of want to transition to this because, we have so many people in our society who are dealing with chronic lower back pain. Is there, and I know it's all on an individual basis, but is there something that you do, Anthony, or is there a certain thing that you've identified, a principle perhaps, that is related to that lower back pain, or there's some way that you help them, you guide them through that a little bit better?
It's a tough question because
I know it's pretty loaded.
It's very loaded, and it's it is such a common problem, but with so many variations behind it, which is exactly why so much of the research around lower back pain is challenged by others. Like you have to take all the research around lower back pain with a grain of salt because they're almost never using a homogeneous subject pool. Meaning that people are different ages, different types of pain, different occupations, different health histories, all this kind of stuff. And when they try to match an intervention to a subject pool, that the results are inevitably going to be skewed by how different the individuals are. But because it affects so many people, and it's natural for all of us to get a little bit of back pain or a little tweak once in a while, right? So if I were to go out and garden for 3 hours and be completely flexed over and picking up stuff and doing very little standing, that is a tissue tolerance that my back wouldn't have because I don't do that all the time, right? So I'm bound to be sore the next day. Now, if that's me and I've never really had chronic back pain, I'm going to have oh man, I did too much. And within 48 hours, I'm back to normal. If I'm the person who's had a bunch of episodes of lower back pain and I get that same sensation, I'm going to go into the oh no mode. Here it comes again, and then I'm going to have a completely different response than the person who's never really had back pain in the past, right? Meaning the stress, anxiety, all that kind of stuff. So, the most important thing for the person with lower back pain is for them to understand that they're not broken, right? That their MRI does not define who they are or what their future looks like. And from a movement standpoint, it does need to get a little bit more specific when we figure out kind of what their primary provocative positions or movements are and then can we find any positions or postures of relief, because that also gives us insight into how they're best going to respond from an exercise standpoint, and then how do we build on that. I would say that you got to be really careful, and again, this is what the research tells us, and it's also, unfortunately, even what a lot of medical professionals are continuing to perpetuate, is that core training, believe it or not, is not the holy grail when it comes to low back pain, right?
Thank you for saying that.
It could be. It's certainly, and matter of fact, for some populations, it's actually counterproductive. For the hypervigilant individual who's already bracing and locking in and not using any variability around their hips and their low back with activities, it can be counterproductive. So, yes, if you're trying to lock down your spine because you have hypermobility there, and you're a follower of Dr. Stuart McGill's teachings around trying to minimize motion for the purpose of either healing or because there's hypermobility there, then there's probably a need for core stability. But it's not the panacea. It's not like, okay, you got back pain, do core training, because then it's not, then you're not seeing that whole biopsychosocial side of things either.
Yeah. I love that you said that. I mean, it seems like a lot of people that I encounter who seem to have some sort of lower back issue, it's always like, I've got a super weak core. I'm like, that's not exactly what's going on. There's a lot more than that. It's like, who came up with this decision that is what it is? You have a weak core and that's it. That's why your back hurts.
Well, I mean, that was perpetuated within both the rehabilitation and the personal training stuff from the work that came out of Hodges and his group in New Zealand many years ago around the transverse abdominis, and it was we've learned now that it's come completely out of context and very limitations within the study and that kind of stuff, and those guys would be the first to admit it. But that's where a big part of it came from, and then it's continued to be perpetuated. And you go to your general practitioner and you got lower back pain, and they're going to tell you, you just got to get a stronger core, right? And this could be somebody that's can do a human flag, and they got lower back pain, right? So you're like, makes no sense.
You got a pretty strong core if you can do that.
Exactly.
Flag. So what about? Because I've heard I've heard physical therapists say to some of my clients that, well, it's your glutes. You got to strengthen your glutes. And I mean, I'd like to think I'm somebody who has a pretty strong gluteal section, but I still suffer from some lower back pain. Is that some of the issue, or is that like the solution?
Well, I like to joke that the glutes are the new core in terms of, who's the hero of the day. Every muscle has value and has an important role, and the cross-sectional size of the glutes obviously create a big influence on over what the pelvis is doing. The way that if I understand the literature and I understand both the biopsychosocial applications in neuroscience as it relates to chronic pain, and I'm pretty well versed in biomechanics, and I want to marry those two because it's important that we do, if we're exercise professionals and movement is our tool of choice, is that there's going to be, if there's biomechanical stress, okay, there's going to be a good chance there's going to be nociception, right? So that's one of those three columns of that biopsychosocial thing. So do I want to mitigate mechanical stress to the system? Yes. Do I want, and that doesn't mean that I absolutely have to strengthen one specific muscle group, but it can be, and I never say, and I mean never say to a client that it's your glutes. I could say that, look, your hip isn't doing this, or we want your hip to do this better. But if let's say it's you, right? And you're this, well-built, well-defined, strong fitness professional, and somebody tells you it's your glutes, right? What does that do to your ego? And what does that do to your perception of all the hard work you've done to date? It tells you that, I must be doing everything wrong. When in fact, your glutes are probably exponentially stronger than the 60-year-old guy next to you who's got a saggy butt and has no low back pain, right?
You're telling me my glutes are just as strong as this guy?
I'm telling you, you're way stronger, but you're having back pain and he isn't. Yeah. And so as a result of that, we got to be careful what we say. And again, it's unique to every individual. The entire experience is unique, and biomechanics is a part of that. So if I needed to reduce mechanical stress on the lower back and the glutes needed to be doing more, that could be part of the equation. Okay. But I'm always careful to kind of put a zero in on one specific thing, because rarely is it, even biomechanically, rarely is it one specific thing. And if it were one specific thing, and you had me trying to fix that, and I was working my glutes, like nobody's business, and glutes. 3 months later, I have done everything that you've told me. My butt is popping now because I've done so much glute work, and my back is still killing me. Where does that leave me?
In a very unhappy state.
Absolutely. Feel like I've wasted my time. Feel like there's no hope because you told me it was my glutes, and I've worked them. I've done everything I can do, and now I'm still in a ton of back pain.
Then we go into more depression, more pain, and we're kind of stuck in this loop, this pain cycle.
Right. And all the byproducts and the downward cycle that goes with that, right? I'm less engaging going out socially. I'm not exercising as much because I'm afraid it's going to provoke it, or I'm going to be like, what's the point? I just did everything I was told. I'll with that depression, and maybe I start eating like crap again to kind of, palliate myself in terms of feeling better short term with some sugar and fast foods, and it's a complete downward spiral.
So then how, as fitness professionals or even for the general population, how can we find the silver lining? Where can we go to, besides function first, where can we go to kind of like get out of this cycle and start to live a life that's pain-free?
Well, that's a great question. And that's part of really getting educated, understanding. If you understand that, the analogy or the metaphor I should say that I use for my clients is if we look at the pain experience, and notice what I keep using that word experience versus sensation, because that's what it is. It's experience. Is that if we look at the pain experience as a bowl of soup, right? And that biopsychosocial are the three shakers we're putting all the ingredients into that bowl of soup, right? And biopsychosocial, each of those, so bio has all those possibilities. Could be that tight muscle, could be that valgus knee, could be that degenerative lumbar spine. It has all those things. And then the psychological has all those aspects to it, the attitudes, the beliefs, the expectations, the past experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And the social has the pressures, the social pressures, the family pressures, the expectations, the withdrawal that comes from not being so, all those things go in there, right? So now you have this giant soup and it's got all these ingredients in it. But if I understand that if I just change a few of the ingredients, I actually change the flavor of the soup. I start to move in a different direction, because the same way that we can have this downward spiral or that snowball starts to roll down and there's this cascading effect of bad things that happen, we can also get a positive cascade. So let's say that I figure out a way. There's a couple postures and positions of rest and movements that I can do, and it's just a handful of things that for the first time ever give me 30 minutes of relief in my back pain, where I can stand up and walk around, where I haven't had that for a year. All of a sudden I'm like, this is amazing, right? Maybe totally. It's only 30 minutes, but in those 30 minutes, I'm actually going to go outside and walk for 5 minutes. And now I'm going to get some sunshine and some fresh air. What does that do to my outlook? And what does that do to my sense of well-being, right? It gives me hope. It gives me the ability to experience some vitamin D and get to smell the roses, as they say, et cetera. And then all of a sudden I come back and, wow, that was a great walk. I'm going to drink a ton of water now. Oh, fantastic. Okay, now I'm drinking water. And then I start to put together another 15 minutes on top of that. Now I'm up to 45 minutes. And now I'm going to start to, maybe do some seated exercises with my arms, because it feels good to get my heart rate up. And then all of a sudden I start to pump out a little bit of dopamine and serotonin. And that carries me over another hour throughout the day. So here we go. Now we've got this positive cascade, and we build on that, and we build on that, and we build on that. And next thing you know, this person sees a light at the end of the tunnel. They have some hope. They might still be experiencing pain, but they're not suffering as much. And they're starting to see that they've got different options and tools in their toolbox that's not limited to opioids or surgery or bed rest.
Yeah, then that right there is absolutely incredible. Just starting off with maybe finding a few minutes of relief, then moving to a little bit more. I feel like people just expect the pain to go away immediately, and then 15 years of pain, one intervention leads to no pain anymore. It's like, no, but I started getting excited listening to you talk about that. I'm like, oh, then I'm going to sleep better, because now, I got outside and I drank more water and I did this.
Exactly.
And there's so much, we completely curved where we were before.
Exactly. And all that is what can happen to that person. And I'll share with you something feedback that I've received from my clients a million times. I'm going to give you, for your fitness professionals, I'm going to give you a little pearl that has worked really well for me. That we spend a great deal of time with clients, and my first appointment is 2 hours with every client, and at least 45 minutes of that 2 hours is just sitting across from them in my office and going over their health history, explaining the neuroscience, hearing about what their hopes and concerns and fears are of what happened in the past. But after we've gone through all that, before we ever walk out onto the floor for any of our movement assessments or anything, I'll say to them, and this is the pearl I think might be of value to the fit pros listening to them. I'll say, what will a successful appointment look like for you today? Now, that does a few things. Number one, it gives me insight into what their expectations is. Two, it makes them think about what their expectation is, right? And And I can't tell you how many times that I've had the response, which is, it's already been a successful appointment to me because of the time that we've spent giving them. So, I thank you for saying that. You said you're excited just listening to that, because that's exactly what an individual sitting across from me, if they understand the possibilities, that it's not an overnight thing. And most of them aren't expecting an overnight thing because they've had it so long. But as soon as they see that there's a possibility and how empowered they can be outside of the presence of me, it gets them excited. Yeah. And so if we spend that time, and so for those folks that can't come to San Diego or don't want to work with somebody in person in their city, that's a big part of it, is understanding where can I score my wins throughout the day, because I can guarantee you they're damn good at counting their losses every day, and it's just natural and normal for anybody who's in pain is to think about all the things that they can't do or all the things that are wrong. And I have all my clients make sure that they're celebrating their little wins, their little victories throughout the day, and acknowledging those, because it's just as important to acknowledge those, because again, all day long, their brain is preoccupied with acknowledging the pain that they're dealing with.
I like it because you spend that time also, I would imagine, validating them and what they're going through, and coming from a position of empathy. And then with that pearl that you said, what would a successful appointment look like today? There's rapport and trust, and they feel like that there's somebody that is looking out for them.
Absolutely. And then I will also follow that up with, when they've told me that, and this might be another piece of value to your listeners, is after they've said that, and to reiterate what you just said, that their experiences, I will say, is there anything I haven't asked that I should have asked? Which gives them a chance to, because most of the time they're just responding to questions, right? And they might elaborate on them, but there might be something that they really want to share with me. And they'll pause and they'll stop. And some people will say, no, I think we covered it all. But at least they'll reflect to see if there was. And at least they know that I've given them that opportunity, and it's open for them to share something else if they really want to share it.
That is awesome. Anthony, I want to know how you're so passionate, well-educated in the science of pain and pain management. How did this all come about? Where was the genesis of your passion for this?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that when I first got out of graduate school, my first real job was with Pete Egoscue, and some of your listeners might be familiar with the Egoscue method. And I had come from a very traditional kind of sports medicine perspective at San Diego State, where I was in the biomechanics sports medicine graduate program. And Egoscue was certainly ahead of his time back then, viewing the body. And he gave me this, and I always describe it as just a different pair of glasses to view the human body through, and really that much more global perspective that was not prevalent at the time. And this is going back to the early 90s, is I'm afraid to say, but it's going back that far. And really got my start there and changed the way that I viewed the body. Now, I was there for only we literally started Function First in 1994. So that's going back a long ways. But it's interesting because I never really think about it. So thanks for asking that. Why am I still passionate about this? Is because for me, it's always a puzzle to solve. And I always like to think, when you see the excitement on clients' faces in these before and after pictures of people that are doing these fat loss challenges and all that, and somebody's lost X amount of inches, and you see how glowing they are and how that's changed their lives, which it has, but it's probably taken 90 days plus, right? Well, if you could see somebody who comes in and what their face looks like and their physiology looks like when they work with us, and then by the end of the session, this person is high-fiving and hugging you because of how they feel for the first time in forever. I mean, that just lights you up enough to take you to the next day and do it all over again. So, for me professionally, one of my core values is making a contribution, and that's making a contribution to the clients that give me the privilege to work with them. As well as making a contribution to the industry and be able to share whatever I feel has helped me and helping my clients, and if it's value to them, to other professionals, then I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to kind of implement that as well. And, but I'll tell you what, and just to be completely forthright, it is a very challenging population to work with, because I could never do 8 clients a day or 8 or 10 for that matter, the way so many of our colleagues are doing. I mean, I might, at the most, I would see 4 clients in a day at the most, because I would be completely exhausted after that. Yeah. And it's because these folks just have a lot going on, and that we have to help them with and work with and accept and try to help them get through at that time. So it takes a lot out of me, which is why I've cut down significantly on my client load.
You're giving a lot of energy to them too, which they require. Absolutely. A lot. There's a lot of understanding and listening and guiding that comes from dealing with pain management. That's incredible. Now I want to know, Anthony, how does the cortex play into all of this?
Well, the cortex is definitely my baby, and something that I developed through my love of movement and biomechanics, and certainly one of those things that I felt there was a need for, and that need wasn't being met. So we've since developed there's a whole separate company called Reactive Training that's around the cortex. But, when I first came up with the idea, which was long before it actually it came to fruition, it was really about how do I create this multi-directional movement of my joints that I'm not getting from the ground and that I'm not getting on my own, that would allow me to stimulate the body in ways that would be beneficial to it. And, since it first came out, and since I first had the idea, the applications of using that environment, that reactive environment of that platform, have just grown and grown and grown, which has been really exciting for me. And there's nothing more rewarding than seeing it getting in the hands of other smart people, and what they start doing with it, and kind of, helping me see another way that it can be used. And it's exciting when you see that your product is being implemented with, professional sports teams around the world, and physical therapy clinics around the world, and in health clubs around the world. And people are enjoying it, or it's a love-hate relationship for some people. But at the end of the day, it's making a contribution, right? It's about movement, and, we want people to move better because it makes life better. And so we can make life better if we help them move better. Absolutely.
Now, you've mentioned that making a contribution is one of your core values. What are some other core values of yours?
It's certainly know your why, and that's obviously a very famous book, and one of the, if not the highest rated TED Talk.
That book changed my life.
Really?
It was unbelievable. Oh yeah. I was in, I tell my wife this all the time. She makes fun of me, but I was working for Equinox in Woodland Hills, California. I was sitting at a Denny's, and I don't know how I came across the book, but I came across it, and I started listening to the Audible version of it. And I just remember just sitting there. I had a couple months prior to that, I had lost a significant amount of my business, and I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? Like, how am I going to survive? And I'm sitting there in this Denny's, and I'm listening to this book. I'm like fired up. I'm like, I am not going to fail. I'm going to come back from this and make this happen. And that book was largely impactful on where I am today.
That's fantastic. And that's a great testimonial. And if people haven't either seen the TED Talk or read the book, I'm sure we both would highly recommend it. Matter of fact, one of my Christmas presents that I received from my wife was the follow-up book called Find Your Why, which is a little bit of a workbook. Yes. And I'm in the middle of that right now as well.
How's that going?
Good. I'm actually just on the first chapter, but I'm at the part where you have to recruit a friend to listen to some story. Yes. So I haven't gotten to that part yet, but it's it's always good stuff. A little review of the first book, and then getting into kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
Very cool. So you've got Know Your Why, Making a Contribution. Are there any others?
Yeah. And for me, which is interesting, is between two businesses and personally, there's just a giant overlap of my core values, meaning that like my core values for Function First are really not different than my core values for Reactive Training, and very similar to what my personal ones are. But my other ones would be kind of as it relates to my businesses: meet then exceed the customer's expectations, and then mistakes equal learning opportunities. Find our better, or find my better, and that's better is in quotations. And then,
what does better mean?
Means wherever I am right now, it's what's the next level. How do I raise my standard to the next level?
I love that
and
one.
Then and then the contribution, and that contribution is meaning to the greater good. How do we make that? How do we uplift whomever or whatever that we're dealing with at that time for the greater good?
Well, that's awesome. Those are some great values. I'm still working on finding mine and establishing my why too. So I've been going through that whole Find Your Why course, but online.
Oh, so they have it online?
Yeah, it's available. You can do it online.
Well, I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, you can do it for everybody at Function First. You guys can actually get the whole team together and discover your whys.
That sounds like a great exercise. We'll put everybody through.
I'll send you a link.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anthony, I want to respect your time. I know we probably just have a few more minutes left here. And I've got a couple final questions here for you. First of all, what is a principle in fitness that you know to be true? Because we have all sorts. I mean, this industry right now is full of a lot of fluff and people who claim to be experts when they're really not. And, there's a lot of confusion, but what is a principle that you've stood firm next to that you know to be true no matter what?
That the resiliency of the human body far exceeds our expectation.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, as organic structures, we're constantly regenerating and reproducing new cells. And when an individual, whether they're 75 years old or whether they're 25 years old and something's happened, the capacity for the body to bounce back, given the right environment, the right fuel, the right brain food, metaphorically, is capable of tremendous recovery. And that's my mindset. And the more I can instill that into individuals that I work with, I think the better chance that they have of finding their better.
That's incredible. And now you've mentioned Pete Egosky. Are there any other mentors that have helped get you to where you are today?
Absolutely. I would say that from a movement biomechanical standpoint, Gary Gray is my go-to guy. He's and the Gray Institute in terms of their understanding of functional biomechanics and anatomy is far exceeds anybody else that I've ever encountered. I would say in terms of, I've only heard him speak in person once, but in terms of understanding the neuroscience of pain in a very digestible way, and one of the thought leaders and research leaders in the world is Lorimer Moseley on chronic pain, him and David Butler. But Moseley, he's also just an amazing speaker, very engaging and entertaining speaker. When it comes to sort of the coaching and psychology, I've learned an incredible amount from our mutual colleague in Bobby Capuccio. Bobby's absolutely amazing. And I mean, I am, as a whole, I'm the sum of so many different people that have influenced me. Certainly I've learned a lot from Michelle Dalcourt in a lot of different ways. I'll tell you what, when Derek Price came to start to work with me, and he was quite a bit younger than me, and still when he started coaching our clients in our group exercise and stuff, I learned a ton from him. And he had a skill set that I didn't have, and I was a student of his in a lot of ways while he was there. And and I've learned from a lot of the big names in our industry as well. The Gray Cooks, I've certainly gotten value from him. On the rehab side, I've gotten value from Craig Levinson, who wrote Rehabilitation of the Spine, and certainly Stuart McGill and a lot of the leaders in motor learning. So there's just so many to list, but having interaction with some of these folks on a real world basis at times certainly enhances the learning experience, right? Yeah.
I mean, you want to get to where you are. It's like what Michelle said over at the summit about increasing your network by 20 times. And the larger the network you have, the more people that you can pull from. Derek Price said, I guess to use the term lightly, he said, to steal from other people kind of builds up who you are.
No question about it. No question about it. And one other person I should never forget is my partner in reactive training, who was Tom Campanaro. And Tom Campanaro, some of your listeners might know, was the kind of inventor and founder of Total Gym. And Tom is an industry legend. He's in the Fitness Hall of Fame, and he's just one of the most sort of generous, kind of outgoing people in our industry that you will find. Anybody that knows him doesn't have a bad word to say about him. And he's taught me so much about business, but not just about business, but in relationships within business and stuff like that. So, and he continues to mentor me as a partner now in this business.
That's awesome. Great mentors here, Anthony. Thank you. Is there a book that you recommend for pain management, or just for our listeners, like a resource that they could go to help mitigate pain a little bit better?
So these are mostly professionals, right, that are listening in?
Professionals, some general population.
Yeah. There's a book which is actually, and this is Laura Mosley's book. It's called Explaining Pain. And I think it's on the second edition, and it's written by him and David Butler. And these guys are out of Australia, but it's a self-help book. And either one of those guys, if you sort of Google them, you're going to find out multiple tools that they have that they use in their books and things like that for helping empowering people, and the education behind it. And they've both of them got a ton of YouTube videos and things like that. And then there's one last thing that's really quick and insightful on YouTube is a channel that's called Brain Man, and it's kind of a whiteboard format that gives a quick overview of a lot of this stuff as well. Brain Man.
Fantastic. I'll be sure to check those out. AC, this has been such an incredible experience. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Where can people find you? And you have a course, right?
Yes, actually, it's just being the updated version of it. We just did a collaboration with the American Council on Exercise. So the Pain-Free Movement Specialist, the online level 1 is available now with ACE. And then we have level 2s and 3s that are done live. So yeah, we're very excited about that. It's all updated. And in fact, Bobby contributes to one of our modules on the coaching side of things, Bobby Capuccio. So we're thrilled to have him as part of it this time around.
Awesome. And then online, best place to find you?
All stuff kind of around the Function First is at functionfirst.com. And if anybody's interested in the Cortex, it's at cortexfitness.com, CORETEX fitness.com.
I'm going to be sure to sign up for this Pain-Free Movement Specialist program, Anthony.
Fantastic. You'll love it.
I'm excited. Any final thoughts before we close here?
I'm very grateful for the opportunity, especially some of the other wonderful folks you've had on here. And I'm probably most excited to hear that you found your why, and this is part of it, and you're living your passion. And I would just encourage you to continue to make a contribution too, Cam.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Take care.
That's it for this week's episode of The Principles of Fitness, everyone. I want to give Anthony a special thanks for being with us on the show today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, leave a comment on iTunes, and stay tuned for the next episode of The Principles of Fitness.